Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. Before we dive into today's story, we just wanted to take a quick second to say thank you all for watching. We truly appreciate your support. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, it's totally free, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest stories. Now, with all that said, let's jump straight into the story.
I've always been a stickler for details, the kind of person who believes nothing happens without a reason. So when my editor at the newspaper handed me the assignment, it seemed like a perfect match. The story was about a tunnel, a rather ordinary tunnel on the surface, connecting the bustling city of Millbrook to the quaint, old town of Eldridge. But it wasn't the tunnel's functionality that made it noteworthy, it was the strange, unexplained disappearances of drivers who entered it. Millbrook and Eldridge were about 100 miles apart, but the tunnel, known as the Shadowbrook Tunnel, cut the travel time in half. It was a marvel of modern engineering, a straight line through the heart of the dense Shadowbrook forest. The tunnel, however, had a dark history. Over the past decade, at least a dozen drivers had vanished without a trace. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just empty cars found on the other side of the tunnel, parked neatly by the roadside as if the drivers had stepped out for a moment and never returned. I decided to take a drive to Eldridge myself, to see what the tunnel was like and perhaps gather some insights from the locals. My editor had given me a week, but I wasn't the kind to dawdle. I wanted to get to the bottom of this mystery, and I had a hunch that the answers lay in the shadows of the tunnel. The morning of my trip was overcast, the sky a heavy gray that seemed to weigh down the air. I loaded my car with a notebook, a camera, and a few essentials, and set off from Millbrook. The drive to the tunnel was uneventful, the forested landscape a blur of green and brown as I approached the entrance. The tunnel itself was a massive structure, its mouth yawning wide like a dark maw. Signs warned of reduced speed limits and the need to use headlights, but there was no mention of the disappearances. As I entered the tunnel, the air grew colder, and the sound of my car's engine echoed off the walls in a way that made my skin crawl. The tunnel was well lit, with a series of fluorescent lights casting a pale, artificial glow. But as I drove deeper, the lights seemed to dim, and the walls closed in, creating a claustrophobic atmosphere. I turned on my camera and began recording, determined to capture every moment of my journey. About halfway through, I noticed something peculiar. The tunnel's walls were smooth and uniform, but there were faint etchings, almost invisible at first glance. I slowed down, and as I got closer, I could see that the etchings were symbols, ancient-looking and incomprehensible. I leaned out of the window, trying to get a better look, when my camera's battery died. Annoyed, I reached for my notebook and pen, but before I could write anything down, I heard a soft whisper. "At last, you've come." I whipped my head around, but there was no one there. The tunnel was empty, or so it seemed. I told myself it was just the wind, but the air inside was still, and the whisper had come from all around me. I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest, the symbols on the walls growing more numerous and more distinct. When I emerged on the other side, I nearly crashed into the car in front of me. It was an old, rusted sedan, parked by the roadside. The driver's side door was open, and the engine was still warm. I pulled over and approached the car, my curiosity getting the better of me. Inside, I found a half-eaten sandwich, a phone, and a wallet. The phone was dead, and the wallet contained nothing but a few receipts and a driver's license. The name on the license was unfamiliar, John Smith, a common name that provided no real clues. I took a deep breath and continued my drive to Eldridge. The town was as quaint as the travel guides described, with cobblestone streets and well-preserved Victorian houses. I parked my car near the center and walked to the local pub, where I hoped to find some information from the townspeople. The pub was bustling, the patrons engaged in lively conversation. I sat at the bar and ordered a coffee, feeling out of place in my city clothes. The bartender, a grizzled man with a thick beard and a friendly smile, approached me. "First time in Eldridge?" he asked, pouring my coffee. "Yes," I replied. "I'm doing a story on the Shadowbrook Tunnel. Have you heard any strange stories about it?" The bartender's smile faltered, and he looked around the pub, as if to ensure no one was listening. "You shouldn't be asking about that place. Bad things happen in there." "Bad things?" I pressed, trying to keep my tone casual. Like what? He leaned in closer. People disappear. Cars come out on the other side, but the drivers never do. Some say it's cursed, others say it's haunted. But whatever it is, it's not natural. Do you believe it's haunted? I asked, intrigued. Let's just say I wouldn't drive through that tunnel after dark. Not unless I wanted to join the others. I thanked him and continued to chat with the other patrons, but no one had any concrete information. They all echoed the same sentiments: bad luck, curses, and hauntings. As the afternoon turned to evening, I decided to take a different approach. I needed to talk to someone who had lost someone to the tunnel. I found a small, run-down house on the outskirts of town. The front door was open, and I could hear a woman sobbing inside. I knocked, and a middle-aged woman with red-rimmed eyes answered. She introduced herself as Sarah, and I explained that I was a journalist looking into the tunnel's disappearances. My husband, Michael, went through that tunnel last year, she said, her voice breaking. He was supposed to pick me up from work, but he never showed. His car was found the next day, just like the others. No sign of him, nothing. Do the police have any leads? I asked, my notebook in hand. She shook her head. They say it's a mystery. But I know it's more than that. I've heard the whispers, the same whispers that drove him to take that drive. They come at night, calling his name, and sometimes I hear them calling mine. I shivered, despite the warmth of the house. Whispers? Can you describe them? They're different for everyone, but they always sound like someone you know. They tell you to go through the tunnel, that you'll find what you're looking for on the other side. It's a promise, a lure. But once you're in, you're lost. I thanked Sarah and left, my mind reeling with the information. The tunnel was a portal, a gateway to something dark and otherworldly. But what exactly was it, and what happened to the drivers who entered? Determined to find out more, I returned to the tunnel the next day, this time with a backup camera and a flashlight. I parked my car at the entrance and walked in, the cold air enveloping me as I made my way through the dimly lit passage. The symbols on the walls were more visible now, and as I approached one, the whisper returned. You can't resist, can you? It said, the voice not my own but somehow familiar. I ignored it, focusing on the symbols. They seemed to be some sort of ancient script, but I couldn't decipher them. I took a few photos and continued deeper into the tunnel. The air grew even colder, and the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I felt a presence, something watching me, but when I turned, there was nothing there. I reached the midpoint of the tunnel, where I had parked the car the previous day. The symbols here were more intricate, forming a pattern that looked like a map or a guide. I traced the lines with my finger, and as I did, the air around me shifted. The temperature plummeted, and a thick fog rolled in, obscuring my vision. The symbols began to glow, and the whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices calling my name. Join us, they said, the words echoing in my mind. Cross over, and you'll find what you seek. Panic set in, and I turned to run, but the fog was so thick that I couldn't see the way out. I stumbled, falling to my knees, and as I looked up, I saw a figure in the distance. It was a man, or at least it looked like one, but his face was obscured, and his body seemed to waver and shift like a mirage. He gestured for me to come closer, and the whispers grew more insistent. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling. I had to get out of there, but the tunnel seemed to stretch on endlessly, the exit receding further with each step. I turned on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the fog, but it only revealed more of the symbols, glowing brighter with each passing second. Then, the figure vanished, and the whispers stopped. The fog began to clear, and I could see the exit up ahead. I ran, my lungs burning. I burst out into the fresh air, the sunlight blinding after the darkness of the tunnel. I leaned against my car, gasping for breath, and looked back at the tunnel. It seemed normal, the entrance inviting, but I knew better. I drove back to Millbrook, my mind a whirlwind of theories and half-formed ideas. I spent the next few days digging through old news articles and police reports, trying to piece together the puzzle. The disappearances had been happening for decades, with no clear pattern or explanation. The tunnel had been built in the early 1900s, and there were rumors that it had been constructed over an ancient burial ground, a site sacred to a long-lost tribe. As I delved deeper, I uncovered a legend. The tribe was said to have made a pact with a malevolent spirit, offering it the souls of travelers in exchange for protection. The tunnel was the spirit's gateway, a portal that led to a realm of the dead. The symbols on the walls were part of an ancient spell, a call to the lost souls to return. I decided to write my story, but before I could finish, I received a call from the police. They had found another car, just like the others, with no sign of the driver. The name on the license was familiar, John Smith, the same name as the one I had found in the car. I drove back to Eldridge, my heart heavy, and met with Sarah. The whispers came again, she said, her eyes wide with fear. They told me it was my turn. I couldn't resist, not this time. I went through the tunnel, and now I'm here, but John isn't. He's gone, like Michael. I felt a chill run down my spine. The tunnel was more dangerous than I had imagined, and the whispers were a trap, a lure to the lost souls who had already crossed over. I knew I had to warn people, but how could I convince them when the evidence was so elusive? I wrote my story, detailing the disappearances, the symbols, and the legend. I included Sarah's testimony in the police reports, but as I submitted it to my editor, I felt a nagging doubt. Would anyone believe me, or would they dismiss it as a sensationalist tale? The story was published, and it made headlines. People were scared, and the tunnel became a place to avoid. But for me, the story was far from over. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had only scratched the surface, that there was more to uncover. One night, I received a message on my phone. It was a voice recording, the voice was distorted but unmistakably the same whispers I had heard in the tunnel. "You're the next one," it said, the words chilling me to the core. "You'll find us on the other side." I knew I had to confront the tunnel one last time, to find out what lay beyond. I packed my car and drove back to Eldridge, my resolve stealing as I approached the tunnel. The entrance was just as inviting as it had been the last time, but I was prepared. I had a bag of salt, a crucifix, and a handful of protective charms I had picked up from a local occult shop. I parked my car at the entrance and walked in, the symbols on the walls glowing faintly in the darkness. The whispers began again, but this time, I ignored them. I focused on the symbols, trying to decipher the ancient script. As I traced the lines, the air around me grew colder, and the fog rolled in again. But this time, I was ready. I sprinkled the salt around me, forming a protective circle. The whispers grew more agitated, the voices rising in pitch, but they couldn't break through the circle. I continued to trace the symbols, and as I did, the fog cleared, revealing a gateway. It was a portal, a shimmering archway that led to a realm of darkness and shadow. I stepped through the gateway, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and curiosity. On the other side, I found myself in a twisted, otherworldly landscape. The sky was black, and the ground was a mix of ash and bone. Ghostly figures roamed the area, their forms wraith-like and insubstantial. I recognized some of them, John Smith, Michael, and others who had disappeared. They approached me, their eyes hollow and their voices empty. "What do you want here?" they asked, their words devoid of emotion. "I want to know why you're here," I replied, my voice steady despite the terror that gripped me. "Why do the whispers bring you to this place?" One of the figures, a woman, stepped forward. "We're lost," she said, her voice a mere echo. "The whispers promise us peace, but we're trapped here, forever. The spirit that controls the tunnel feeds on our despair, our longing to return. It keeps us here, using us to lure more souls." I felt a surge of empathy and determination. "How do we stop it?" I asked. "How do we break the spell?" The woman's ghostly form wavered. "You can't," she said, her voice growing fainter. "The tunnel is part of it. But you can warn others, tell them to stay away. The whispers will grow weaker without new souls to feed on." I nodded, my mind racing. I had to get out of there, to warn the world about the danger. I turned and ran back to the gateway, the ghostly figures calling after me, their voices a haunting symphony of despair. I stepped back through the portal and emerged on the other side of the tunnel, my clothes torn and my heart racing. I ran to my car and drove back to Millbrook, the tunnel's entrance growing smaller in the rearview mirror. I wrote a follow-up story, detailing my experience and the warning from the ghosts. The tunnel was closed, and a team of paranormal experts was brought in to investigate. The symbols were removed, and the tunnel was sealed off, a warning sign posted at the entrance. But I knew the spirit was still there, waiting, and the whispers would never truly be silenced. I had done what I could, but the tunnel remained a mystery, a dark reminder of the unknown that lurked just beyond the veil of the ordinary. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, I can still hear the whispers, calling my name, tempting me to return. But I know better now. I know the road to whispers leads to a place from which there is no return. Let us know in the comments section below, would you have returned to the tunnel? Ready for spine-chilling tales that will haunt your thoughts? Subscribe to Forgotten Storyteller for eerie narrations, unsettling mysteries, and haunting stories you won't forget. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story, because some stories refuse to stay buried. Join us, if you dare.